Good morning. I'm Barbara Bryan, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley's Board of Trustees. I'd like to welcome you to our virtual service. If you are new to us and would like to receive our electronic communications, please contact our church administrator. Contact information is on our website at the link for visitors, UUCSV.org. That's UUCSV.org. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed. Our shared covenant, our 7 principles, supports the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Though universalism and Unitarianism were both liberal Christian traditions, this responsible search has led us to embrace diverse teachings from Eastern and Western religions and philosophies. Now let our service begin.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. We invite you to join us for today's service. I want to begin with the words of Howard Thurman and then light our chalice. And let's get the ball rolling here. The words of Dr. Thurman: I will light candles this Christmas, candles of joy despite all the sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles of courage for fear ever present, candles of peace for tempest-tossed days, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire all my living, and candles that will burn the whole year long. Our opening hymn this morning is number 225, O Come, Emmanuel, hymn number 225. Our reading this morning is from the section on humanist teachings, reading number 647, An Eternal Verity. Ancient as the home is the temple, ancient as the workbench is the altar, ancient as the sword is the sacrificial fire, ancient as the soldier is the priest. Older than written language is spoken prayer, older than painting is the thought of a nameless one. Religion is the first and the last, the universal language of the human heart. Differing words describe the outward appearance of things. Diverse symbols represent that which stands beyond and within. Yet every person's hunger is the same, and heart communicates with heart. Ever the vision leads on with many gods or this one, with a holy land washed by ocean waters, or holy land within our hearts. In temperament we differ, yet we are dedicated to one august destiny. Creeds divide us, but we share a common quest. Because we are all human, we shall ever build our altars. Because each has a holy yearning, we offer everywhere our prayers and our anthems. For an eternal verity abides beneath diversities. We are children of one great love, united in our one eternal family.
Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well.
He is born, the divine Christ child.
Teacher, we glad tidings tell.
Play the flute, play the tuneful oboe.
Sing we know well, the child is born Noel. Sing we know well,
Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well. Come let us surround him on this special night.
gather here
He is born, Jesus the Lord, coming as a triumph. Jesus the Lord, grant to us thy heavenly peace. Sing we know well.
the child is born Noel. Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well.
He is born, the divine Christ child.
Teacher, we glad tidings tell.
Play the flute, play the tuneful oboe.
Sing we know well, the child is born Noel. Sing we know well,
Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well. Come let us surround him on this special night.
gather here
He is born, Jesus the Lord, coming as a triumph. Jesus the Lord, grant to us thy heavenly peace. Sing we know well.
the child is born Noel. Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well.
He is born, the divine Christ child.
Teacher, we glad tidings tell.
Play the flute, play the tuneful oboe.
Sing we know well, the child is born Noel. Sing we know well,
Sing we now of Christmas, sing we all know well. Come let us surround him on this special night.
gather here
He is born,
on the state of light.
Jesus the Lord,
a child is born, Noel.
Sing we all are glad.
This is the time in the service when we invite you to share a joy, a concern, a sorrow. We're making it through this year. It's been a year. And again, I remind you that, through the ups and downs, we suffer, we grieve, and we keep hope alive. And so in that spirit, I invite you now to share a joy, a concern, and a sorrow, knowing that you have a community here, a free, religious, liberal community, and that you are not alone.
I only received one joy this week. It came from Ellen Kirshner. She called me and she wanted to say thank you to the church, to Michael, and everyone who helped to put together the Hanukkah service. She was very moved by the celebration of her heritage, and she wanted to make sure that the church and everyone knew how much it affected her and how special it was. So we were happy to do it for Ellen and for the entire Jewish culture and Jewish religion. We think it's important to ensure that we're inclusive. So thank you, Ellen. I have one concern this week. My grandmother was diagnosed with coronavirus. She lives in a nursing home and she is 89. So a little bit concerning. So far, she's just had a bad cough and not many other symptoms. And they've been watching her very, very closely. So she's my last living grandmother. So I hope that she's able to make it through this and we can get through it and I can go visit her. I haven't seen her since last Christmas. So at least in person. On a couple Zoom meetings, we've seen each other, but she doesn't do too well with that. So thanks for everyone holding her in your hearts.
For those of you who decided for whatever reason, once again, not to share a joy or a sorrow, know that we keep you in our thoughts and in our prayers and in our hearts. And we're here. We're here for you. Our meditation today is from the words of a retired UU Christian minister. His name is George Kimmich Beach. I've used some of his stuff, but especially around this time of year. So please center yourself as you see fit. Make yourselves comfortable. Take a deep breath and let these words sink in. In this season of grace, we seek faith, hope, and love. Let our meditations be centered in the stillness within. Let our prayers reach out to encompass holiness of being, and let us find the sacred place where our inward hearts and the whole world's longing are one. Time catches us up. The urgency we feel in the swift rush of our lives and the fateful weight we feel in the awesome events of the world, they distract us. So we set this time apart to be mindful in our meditations and at one in our prayers. Sacred is the event that redeems our love and gives us hearts ready to reach out to the friend and to the stranger, to those we love and to those that the world despises. In our mixed longing for love and proud independence, like a holy family, each of us fragile, each of us vessels of life, we come together by the strongest bonds on earth. May we love always, and may we be reborn ourselves this day. And with that sentiment in mind, while our minds and hearts are one, I leave you with the eloquence of silence. So it is.
The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown.
The rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the playing of the merry instruments, sweet singing in the choir. The holly so green, there's a blossom so white, and the berry of crimson, so rich and so bright. The ivy so green, evergreen all year through, may the holly and the ivy bring hope and joy to you. The holly so green, there's a blossom so white, and a berry of crimson, so rich and so bright. The ivy so green, evergreen all year through, may the holly and the ivy bring hope and joy to you. May the holly and the ivy bring hope and joy to you.
I want to share with you this morning what I call a COVID Christmas holiday and a message about hope. So what I want to do is I want to set the table this way. I want to give us just some suggestions of how we can get through this holiday. It'll be a different holiday in many, many ways. And then I want to lay out my testament of hope about what I think we can and maybe should be doing as we move forward. So after months and months of wearing masks and foregoing hugs and keeping 6 or more feet apart from others, some are complaining of what we are calling COVID fatigue. And they may be the lucky ones. For people who have lost a family member or a job because of the disease, who are separated from frail relatives in poor health, or who may supervise the virtual schooling of several children, while somehow simultaneously doing their own work. Coronavirus is an acid that corrodes our lives. Okay, in the beginning, there was a lot of energy around this whole situation. We were trying to work and we were facing the challenge of the virus. And there's a kind of depletion that comes from that. There's a fatigue, there's a compassion fatigue, there's the COVID fatigue going on and on and on. And the longevity of it is draining in and of itself, let alone the uncertainties in so many aspects of our world. The pandemic has shone a bright light, not only on national and state politics and systemic racism, but on disparities within the social classes as well. What do you say to a person who has to take off from work or to supervise virtual learning for their child? I'm afraid there's nothing much you can say. The money is either being made or it isn't. I think the pandemic is teaching us that day-to-day well-being is vitally important and that each of us must steward well-being as much as we possibly can. Parents, I'm in that number, in that group, are not only responding to their children's questions about algebra and grammar, they're fielding sharp queries about the pandemic and the chaotic governmental responses to it. Black Lives Matter demonstrations and counter-protests, violence in the United States and elsewhere, and the continuing tension of the presidential election and where we go from here as a nation. These are all on our minds. We must be honest and transparent about our own level of upset, and we must explain our views. We must acknowledge, however, that people have faced very difficult challenges before us. The Great Depression, World War I and II, the Dust Bowl. And we've come through on the other side. Finally, make it a creative challenge to lighten up at least a few minutes of each day. I listen to a lot of music and I listen to a lot of quiet. I'm not saying you need to do that. I'm just saying that it's a suggestion. We're in the last quarter of the year. We've already had Thanksgiving. There's Christmas and New Year's and other holiday celebrations. They're going to be different this year, especially for people who are extroverts or for people who like to do things big and social. If people need to grieve the loss of some rituals this year, feel the sadness of that and don't stay stuck in the anger. Look at the core essence of what these holidays mean. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, and we can argue that every day is Thanksgiving. And Christmas is about generosity and the importance of keeping hope alive. It's even more a time for being grateful for what we have with the people that we can safely gather with. It is not as though we will not celebrate at all. We will simply celebrate differently. Just as life is what a person makes of it, the same will be true of this holiday season. I suggest embrace the differentness of the holidays. Listen to a little less news if you want, or listen to none at all. Listen to a lot more music. Spend more time in quiet and solitude if you can, because spiritual health stems from gratitude and generosity. The bottom line is this: the future will not, in crucial ways, be anything like the past from now on. You've got to be ready for this. As a planet and as a species, we have reached a crossroads. We have emerged from what we assumed was normality, and things have suddenly been overturned. One of the main tasks now, especially for those of us who fortunately are not sick, are not frontline workers, and are not dealing with other economic or housing difficulties, what we need to do is to understand the moment, what it might require of us, and what it might make possible. That's our job. This virus has forced us, and God knows we needed a new perspective to change our worldview and our places in it. Change is not only possible, but necessary. And now we're all caught up in it. You see, we change as our priorities shift, and an intense awareness of our morality and our mortality makes us wake up to our own lives and the preciousness of life. Even our definition of we might change as we are separated from school workers, co-workers, or schoolmates, or sharing this new reality with strangers. Our sense of self generally comes from the world around us, and right now we are finding another version of who we are. As the pandemic upended our lives, many people had trouble focusing, trouble being productive. But the body is growing and changing all of the time, even when it feels as if you are doing nothing. The body is constantly growing and healing and making and transforming itself just below the level of consciousness. So as we struggle to learn the science and the statistics of the virus, our psyches were doing the same thing. We were adjusting to the profound social and economic changes, studying the lessons that the virus and the pandemics have taught us and will continue to teach us, preparing ourselves for an unanticipated world. The first lesson is that everything is really connected. This is not some kumbaya saying. Everything is connected. At moments of immense change, we see with new clarity, if we care to look, the systems, political systems, economic systems, social, ecological, in which we are immersed and how they are changing around us. We see what's wrong. We see what's weak, what matters, and what doesn't. Those who benefit the most from the shattered status quo are more often more focused on preserving or reestablishing the status quo rather than protecting human life. Many politicians and corporations insisted that for the sake of the stock market, everyone had to go back to work and accept the losses. In a crisis, the powerful often try to seize even more power. This is true throughout history. This is nothing new. An illustration is the Justice Department at the beginning of the crisis looking to suspend constitutional rights. The wealthy seeking more wealth. A few senators under fire for using inside information about the coming pandemic to make a profit in the stock market. This is nothing new, this kind of avarice and greed. These senators, of course, have denied any wrongdoing at all. Historically, there have always been, and probably always will be, titans of industry who prize the lifeless thing that is profit over living beings, who paid bribes in order to separate themselves or to operate as usual, working children to death, putting laborers in mortal danger in sweatshops and coal mines. One of the primary uses of wealth has always been to buy one's way out of the common fate, or at least to distance themselves from the common people. And in our country, while the rich are often conservative, conservatives more often align themselves with the rich, whatever their economic status. It's interesting. The reality that everything is connected is anathema to those who cherish individualism. Climate change is an insult to them, for it says that we are responsible. It says that what comes out of our cars, our chimneys, etc., shapes the fate of the world in the long run. And it affects our food, our sea levels, our forests. If everything is connected, then our actions and our words have consequences. What you and I may see as love in action, someone else may see as an infringement on personal and absolute freedom. Freedom being another word for no limits in their pursuits of self-interest. For many of us in the so-called developed or first world, what has changed the most is spatial. And that is to say that we have stayed at home, those of us who are fortunate enough to have homes. And away from contact with others, we have withdrawn from schools, from workplaces, from conferences and parties and vacations and bars and gyms and places of worship, from the busyness and the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Well, we did at least in the beginning of the pandemic. Philosopher mystic Simone Weil once wrote, "Let us love this distance, which is thoroughly woven with friendship, since those who do not love each other are not separated." We have withdrawn from each other to protect each other, and people have found ways to assist the vulnerable despite the need to remain physically distant. We are witnesses today to daily displays of love that show why human beings have survived this long in the first place. We counter and we encounter acts of courage and citizenship each day in our communities and in other cities and countries. Encounters that whisper to us that those few who are spreading fear and spreaders of confusion and lies will eventually be overcome by legions of stubborn people who refuse to be led into despair and violence and indifference and arrogance that our so-called leaders appear so eager nowadays to lead us to. Anyway, that's my hope. Having a vaccine now is just the beginning. I wonder and I hope that we will rethink our connections to one another, how we moved about, and how the things we rely on move about. Perhaps we will appreciate face-to-face contact a bit more. Perhaps we will find a new respect for the workers who produce our food and those who bring it to our tables. Yes, staying put is difficult, but perhaps we will be a bit more reluctant to rush about so much, and maybe we will maintain a sense of stillness, and that will stay with us in the time ahead. Getting and spending, we lay waste to our powers, Wordsworth reminded us 200 years ago. There is enough for all of us. There is enough food, there's enough clothing, there's enough shelter, there's enough education, there's enough health care, believe it or not, if we would make it so. Access to these things should not depend on what job you do or how much money you have. Perhaps the virus is making the case for those not already convinced for universal health care and a basic income. In the aftermath of a crisis, a change of consciousness and priorities can be powerful forces. Again, at least that's my hope. Yet oftentimes the consequences of crises are not immediate or direct. Despite the news of a vaccine, we may only be in the early stages of this pandemic. I hope that I am wrong. Yet this is also a time for spending more time at home and more time alone and looking outward at this unanticipated world. It can be sad, but there is meaning in sadness. There is meaning in pain, and there is meaning in grief. These are the emotions born of empathy and solidarity. If you are sad and frightened, it is a sign that you care, that you are connected with spirit. If you are overwhelmed, well, it's overwhelming. It is overwhelming. 7 years ago, Patrice Cullors wrote a sort of mission statement for the Black Lives Matter movement. She says, we are here to provide hope and inspiration for collective action, to build collective power, and to achieve collective transformation. Transformation that is rooted in grief and rage, but pointed towards visions and dreams. It's a beautiful mission statement, not only because it is hopeful, and not only because Black Lives Matter set out and did and still does transformative work, but it's beautiful because it acknowledges that hope can coexist with difficulty and suffering. The sadness and the depths and the fury that burns above are not incompatible with hope, because we are complex creatures, because sometimes hope is not simply optimism that everything will be fine regardless. Hope offers us a clarity that amid the uncertainty ahead, there will be conflicts worth joining and the possibility of winning them. And one of the things most dangerous to this hope is to lapse into believing that everything will simply be fine. It will be fine. It was fine until the virus struck, and that all we need to do is to return to things as they were. No, there has to be a new normal. Lawyer, author, and founder of the National Memorial Museum for Justice and Peace, also known as the Lynching Museum, Brian Stevenson says that those who don't have hope are part of the problem. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true all the time, but it is something to consider. Albert Camus says that where there is no hope, it is incumbent on us to invent it. But hope without a desperate plan is self-destructive. Ordinary life before the pandemic was already a catastrophe of desperation and exclusion for too many human beings, an environmental and climate catastrophe, an obscenity of inequality. It is much too soon to know what will emerge from this emergency, but not too soon to start looking for chances to help decide it. It is my hope that this is what many of us in the time ahead are planning to do. This is my testament of hope for a coronavirus holiday. Thank you, and may it always be so. Amen, and blessed be. Our closing hymn this morning is hymn number 273, Immortal, Invisible. Hymn number 273. Let me close with these words. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight every single one of our fears, which reconciles all who are separated, may that love be with us and among us and in us until we meet again. Have a wonderful week. See you on Christmas Eve. Thank you. Amen.